Thanks to Maya for that reporting. It is pretty exciting to see this next generation of astronauts prepared to go back to the moon. But it made us wonder, why haven't we been back to the moon in almost 50 years? Leroy Chiao was just 8 years old the first time the U.S. sent men to the moon. He's a retired NASA astronaut and former International Space Station commander. Leroy, thank you so much for being back with us.
Yeah, pleasure to be with you.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. And I just off the bat, I'm going to ask you, what has been the greatest obstacle to going back?
Frankly, it's been a political, there's been no political reason ever since we won the so-called space race and beat the Soviet Union to the moon. Back then, it was, kind of a warlike footing where it was imperative that the United States beat the Soviets to the moon. And we did. We landed 6 missions. And, had 12 Americans walk on the moon. The Russians never did get there with humans. And since we did that in 1972 there hasn't been a political imperative to go back because it's going to take a lot of funding to go back.
Right. Well, speaking of that, I want to pull up a survey from 2021 because it asked U.S. adults about priorities for the government's space agenda. And you can see that 42% said that sending astronauts to the moon was not too important of a priority. And 14% said it shouldn't be done, period. So is returning to the moon a hard sell to Americans?
In a way it is. I mean, in a way we've been victims of our own success. We made it to the moon. You had the 6 missions where astronauts walked and drove around on the moon. And then we had the shuttle program, which is very successful. Now the International Space Station program, also very successful. But the success makes it seem like it's routine and makes it seem maybe not that exciting anymore. And so in a way, we are victims of our own success. But the key to going to the moon, or why we should go to the moon, for me, it's to use that to develop our operational and hardware capabilities so that we can safely send humans to Mars sooner rather than later.
So it's a stepping stone, if you will, I mean, to go to the moon, back to it, so that you can prepare for Mars. I want to bring up the private aspect to this because we've seen privately funded space missions over the last few years. I mean, Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, SpaceX. Could a private space flight beat NASA back to the moon?
I think that could very easily happen, and I'm thinking in particular about SpaceX. Elon Musk, a very energetic individual. He's been driving SpaceX and his other companies to produce beyond what the so-called experts thought was possible. And so now Starship is being developed, and that's the goal of the Starship is, of course, to take people to Mars, to build his Mars colony. But on the way, he now plans to stop at the moon. So we may see SpaceX actually get there well before NASA, but perhaps there's a possibility for NASA to partner with SpaceX and go together.
Okay, I was going to say maybe it's a little bit of that competition aspect that would help fuel the race back to the moon, but they could work together. Finally, we learned about the Artemis mission before. So what's the latest on that?
Well, the Artemis mission has been a long time in the making, ever since the prior program that it sprang out of. That's been in development since basically 2004, 2005. And then the hardware has been continued to be developed all these years. And the rocket is now actually, has been stood up on the launch pad. They're hoping to launch that first uncrewed mission before the end of the year. There's been a lot of delays, cost overruns, things like that. And frankly, the funding hasn't been there to the level required to get it done sooner rather than later.
How much are we talking that would make it happen?
Well, at the peak of the Apollo program, the U.S. was spending almost 5% of the national budget on the moon program. In comparison, NASA has been running for decades right around 1% or a little less, and now we're a little bit above that, maybe 1.2% thereabouts. So not really at the levels necessary to get it done soon.
Got it. Well, thank you for clarifying on that. I have to, when you throw out money, I'm like, what's the price tag? Retired NASA astronaut Leroy Chiao, thank you so much for joining us on The Why.
My pleasure. Thank you.